They thought bonding with her enemy would kill her. They thought Lyra Ashwood was a useless Omega. But they were wrong. Draven Sinclair wasn't hunting for a mate. He was hunting for a traitor, and the woman who could save his kingdom. Lyra woke to warmth, not the thin, threadbare kind that came from stolen blankets and servant quarters, not the fragile heat of cooking fires that died before dawn. This warmth was alive, breathing, wrapped around her like armor she never asked for. Her eyes opened to unfamiliar darkness, silk sheets, cedar and steel in the air. A room 3 times larger than any place she'd ever slept, and a man. His chest rose and fell against her spine. His arm rested heavy across her waist, possessive, his face buried in her hair. Each breath he took seemed to pull her deeper into something she couldn't name, something that felt like drowning and flying at the same time. Lyra's heart slammed against her ribs. She didn't know this man, didn't know this room, didn't know how she got here, or why every instinct in her body screamed 2 opposite truths. Run, and stay exactly where you are. Her fingers moved first, slow, careful. She felt the band on her left hand before she saw it. Silver, engraved with symbols she couldn't read in the dim light. A wedding ring that had never been there before. No, her right hand flew to her neck, to the burning sensation she'd been ignoring since consciousness returned. Her fingertips found raised skin, a mark, fresh, still tender. The unmistakable signature of a mating bond seared into her flesh like a brand she never consented to. No, no, no. The man behind her shifted, his arm tightened around her waist. A low sound rumbled through his chest. Not quite a growl, something deeper, more primal, more terrifying because it sounded almost content. Lyra froze. 3 impossible truths stared back at her from the shadows. The silver wedding band glinting on her finger that she'd never seen before. The mating mark burning on her neck that she'd rather die than accept. And the slowly dawning horror that she had no memory of how any of this happened. The last thing she remembered was the summit reception. Wine, conversation. Walking toward the medical wing because someone said they needed help with supplies. Then nothing. A black void where hours should have been. 12 hours, maybe 18, gone like smoke. Your pulse suggests you're about to do something reckless. His voice cut through the darkness. Rough with sleep, threaded with an authority that made her wolf whimper in submission. A reaction that infuriated her because she'd spent 3 years training her wolf to feel nothing, to be silent, to survive by being invisible. Let me go, Lyra whispered. Her voice didn't sound like her own. Too thin, too breakable. Can't. He shifted slightly. She felt every hard plane of him against her back. Every muscle, every breath. The sheer size of him made her feel small in a way she hated, made her remember what it felt like to be powerless, to watch everything burn and be unable to stop it. We're bonded now, he continued. That same rough voice, like gravel and smoke. The moment I release you beyond 20 feet, the separation pain starts. You really want to experience that before figuring out what happened. We're not bonded. Lyra's hands fisted in the silk sheets. This is some kind of mistake. A setup. The mating mark on your neck and the wedding certificate would disagree. His thumb traced idle circles on her hip, a gesture so casually intimate it made her want to scream. Though I'll admit I'm as confused as you are, I don't make a habit of marrying women whose names I barely know. That made her pause, made her forget the panic long enough to process what he'd said. What do you mean you barely know my name? Tell me, Lyra. He said her name like he was testing it on his tongue for the first time. What's the last thing you remember from last night? And that's when Lyra realized the truth was so much worse than waking up married to a stranger. She couldn't remember anything at all. The pain hit 15 feet from the bed. Lyra had moved without thinking. Desperation made her stupid. The ornate doors across the chamber seemed close enough, an escape, a chance to run, to think, to breathe air that wasn't thick with cedar and steel and the scent of a man she didn't know. She made it halfway before her body betrayed her. It started as a dull ache in her chest, then exploded into agony that dropped her to her knees. Sharp, burning, like someone had wrapped barbed wire around her heart and pulled. Her wolf howled inside her, clawing at her ribs as if trying to turn back toward the warmth she'd just abandoned. The bond, the cursed impossible bond, was real. Lyra gasped, her vision blurred. She couldn't breathe through the pain, couldn't think past the white-hot fire spreading through her veins. Strong arms caught her before she hit the marble floor. Easy. His voice was closer now, gentler than she expected. Don't fight it. The pain only gets worse. Get away from me, Lyra managed through gritted teeth. But even as she said it, the agony was receding, fading to a dull throb now that he was close again, now that his hand steadied her. now that his warmth chased away the cold that had nothing to do with temperature. Believe me, he said quietly, I'd love nothing more than distance right now, but it seems we're stuck with each other. He helped her back toward the bed, kept her upright when her legs threatened to give out. Lyra hated how steady his grip was, how careful, like she was something fragile instead of something already broken 3 years ago. When they reached the bed, she finally looked at him, really looked. The man was built like a weapon, 6.5 feet of corded muscle and barely restrained power. Scars traced patterns across his bare chest. Old wounds, battle marks, the kind that came from surviving things that should have killed you. His face was all sharp angles, strong jaw, amber eyes that seemed to see too much, hair dark as midnight and just long enough to be uncivilized. He wore sleep pants and nothing else. Every inch of him screamed danger. And Lyra knew him, not personally, not from memory, but from reputation, from whispered warnings among refugees. From 3 years of hiding and praying, she'd never crossed paths with the man who'd destroyed everything she loved. Draven Sinclair, the executioner, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, the man who'd ordered the Clearwater Massacre. Her stomach turned to ice. This can't be happening, she breathed. Draven's expression shifted. Something that might have been concern flickered across his features before the mask returned. You recognize me. It wasn't a question. Lyra didn't answer. Couldn't. Because if she opened her mouth, she might scream. Might demand to know why the gods hated her enough to bond her to the one man whose soldiers had killed her family, whose orders had burned her home, whose name she'd learned to fear more than death itself. We need to figure this out, Draven said. He moved to the adjoining room. Lyra heard pottery clatter, running water, then a muttered curse that would have made a sailor blush. Do you need help? The words escaped before she could stop them, a healer's instinct she'd tried to suppress for 3 years. I've commanded armies across 5 territories. His voice carried irritation and something that might have been embarrassment. But apparently I can't operate a tea kettle. Despite everything, despite the horror and the fear and the wrongness of it all, the corner of Lyra's mouth twitched. The great executioner. Defeated by kitchen equipment. He emerged moments later with 2 cups, one slightly singed at the handle. His expression dared her to comment. Lyra accepted the tea. Their fingers brushed. The contact sent a spark through the bond. Electric, undeniable. They both jerked back like they'd been burned. This is bloodbane, Draven said suddenly. He studied his cup with the focus of a man who'd seen too much death to ignore the signs. The memory loss. I've seen it used on prisoners. Leaves a 12 to 18-hour gap depending on dosage. Lyra's medical training agreed, though admitting that would reveal too much about who she was, what she'd been before the world burned. Someone drugged us. Both of us. His amber eyes fixed on her. Calculating, which means this wasn't random. Someone wanted this bond. Before Lyra could respond, the doors burst open. A tall man swept in, silver threaded through his dark hair, smile that didn't reach his eyes. He carried himself with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent decades navigating palace politics. Behind him, servants carried breakfast trays laden with food Lyra hadn't eaten in years. Your Majesties, the man's voice dripped false warmth. I trust you're enjoying your first morning as husband and wife. Such a romantic evening you gave us all. The way you couldn't keep your eyes off each other during the ceremony. Draven's expression went carefully blank. Victor, perhaps you could refresh our memories about the ceremony. The blood wine must have been stronger than expected. Victor Graves. Lyra recognized him now. Chief advisor. The king's right hand for 20 years. His smile never wavered as he lied. You declared your love before the entire summit, he said. Quite passionate. The council members were moved to tears. Lyra's stomach churned. Every word was a fabrication. She could hear it in the too smooth delivery, see it in the way his eyes never quite met theirs. I'll need witness statements, Draven said, his tone brooking no argument. And the ceremony records, of course, Your Majesty. Victor's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in his eyes as they landed on Lyra. I'll have them brought immediately. In the meantime, perhaps your lovely bride should rest. She looks quite overwhelmed. After he left, silence stretched between them. Lyra watched Draven move to lock the doors. She noticed his slight limp, an old injury that hadn't quite healed right. Her healer's eye cataloged it automatically. The way he favored his left leg, the tension in his right shoulder, the kind of damage that came from a blow that connected before it could be blocked. She knew that limp. Had seen it created 3 years ago when a Clearwater healer's desperate strike had landed true before she was cut down. We need to figure out who did this, Draven said quietly. And why? Can I trust you to help me? Lyra met his gaze. Saw shadows there that matched her own. The man who'd destroyed her world was asking for her help, and the worst part was she needed his too. Reluctantly, she answered. His mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. I'll take it. Over the next hour, reality crystallized into something almost manageable. Servants arrived with Lyra's belongings, what little she had as a refugee who'd spent 4 months disguised as palace help. 3 servant dresses, a spare pair of shoes, a medical kit she'd assembled from scraps, and her journal. Except the journal wasn't there. Panic clawed up Lyra's throat as she rifled through the trunk. Not there. She tore through the smaller bag. Nothing. The leather-bound book she'd kept hidden for 3 years. The one place she'd written things she could never say aloud. It was gone. What's wrong? Draven was beside her in 3 strides. Nothing. Lyra's hands shook. I just had a book. Personal notes. It's missing. From these trunks or from your quarters, I don't know. I haven't been back to my quarters since waking up in his bed. Draven's expression hardened. Show me. The walk through the palace corridors was torture. Servants stopped mid-task to stare. Their whispers followed like a wake. Lyra caught fragments that made her want to sink through the floor. Tamed the executioner. Love at first sight, they say. Never seen His Majesty smile like that. They passed the head housekeeper, an older woman who actually had the audacity to stop Draven with a hand on his arm. Your Majesty, she said. Her eyes twinkled. If I may offer some matrimonial wisdom. A happy wife requires regular foot massages and frequent compliments on her hair. My late husband swore by it. Lyra wanted the marble floor to swallow her whole. Thank you, Mariana. Draven's ears had gone slightly red. I'll keep that in mind. Also flowers. Women love flowers, especially the surprise kind, noted. As they finally escaped, Lyra caught the briefest twitch of Draven's mouth. Not quite a smile, but close. Not a word he warned. Wouldn't dream of it, Your Majesty. Her quarters in the servants' wing were small, a single room with a narrow bed and a washstand. The door hung open, and the moment Lyra stepped inside, her stomach dropped. Ransacked. Every drawer pulled out. Her mattress overturned. Her few books scattered across the floor like discarded trash. Someone had torn the room apart looking for something. Your journal, Draven said quietly. Maybe. Lyra knelt, gathered torn pages of a medical text she'd borrowed from the palace library. Her hands shook, because whoever did this had been thorough, desperate, and they'd found what they were looking for. He crouched beside her, his voice gentler than she expected. What was in it? Everything. Her real name, observations about the palace, sketches of Clearwater symbols she'd drawn when the memories got too heavy. Personal things, nothing important. You're a terrible liar. But Draven didn't push. Instead, he stood and called for guards. From now on, you have a protection detail. I don't need... That wasn't a request. His tone left no room for argument. Someone orchestrated our bonding. And now they're searching your quarters until we know why you're not walking around unguarded, protected or imprisoned. The line felt razor thin. Back in Draven's chambers, evening had fallen. The awkwardness of their situation intensified when Lyra realized she needed to bathe. 3 years of poverty meant she'd grown accustomed to cold water and quick washes. But Draven's bathroom was a marvel of marble and bronze. A tub large enough to swim in, heated water that steamed invitingly. I need the bond radius, she said stiffly. Draven looked up from the documents he'd been reviewing. Understanding dawned, followed by something that might have been embarrassment. 20 feet. I'll be in the study with the door closed. Call if the pain starts. The door clicked shut. Lyra undressed quickly, sank into water that had been heated to perfection. For 5 blissful minutes, she let herself forget. The bond, the danger, the man on the other side of the door. Then a memory slammed into her. Running through palace corridors, heart pounding, someone chasing her. She'd been terrified, clutching something to her chest. The medical wing, she'd been heading there before what Lyra Draven's voice carried through the door. Concerned, your distress is bleeding through the bond. She hadn't realized she was broadcasting. I'm fine, just remembered something. Part of last night. The door opened a crack. What did you remember? I was running. Someone was after me. She wrapped herself in a towel, stepped out. I was going to the medical wing. Draven's expression shifted to something dangerous. Why, I don't know. But I had something important enough to run for. He was silent for a long moment, then moved to a cabinet and pulled out what looked like classified documents. These are the summit attendance records, he said. Every pack represented, every delegate, every guard. If we're going to figure this out, we need to know who was in the palace that night. Lyra stepped closer, still wrapped in the towel, water dripping from her hair. The intimacy of the moment wasn't lost on either of them. Her half-dressed, him handing her state secrets in his private chambers. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. "Why not just break the bond and be done with it?" Draven's amber eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw past the king to the man beneath, tired, haunted, carrying weight that would crush most people. "Because someone played us both like pieces on a board," he said, "and I don't like being played." Later, as Lyra lay in Draven's massive bed and he arranged himself on the couch despite his obvious discomfort, she stared at the ceiling, her eyes caught on a portrait across the room. Draven and an older man, presumably his father, both wore crowns, both had the same haunted look in their eyes. She recognized that look, saw it every time she looked in a mirror. The expression of someone who'd survived when others hadn't, someone carrying ghosts. "The couch is mine," Draven announced from across the chamber. Lyra blinked. "What sleeping arrangements?" He gestured to the ornate sofa near the fireplace. "I'll take it. You get the bed. You're injured." The words slipped out before she could stop them, her eyes flicking to his leg. His gaze sharpened. "How did you know that?" Her heart stuttered. Too observant. She'd been too observant. "You favor your left side. Anyone could see it. Most people don't notice." He studied her with unsettling intensity. "But fine. We'll alternate. Tonight you take the bed. Tomorrow we switch." "How generous," Lyra muttered. She tried to sleep, failed. Her mind kept circling back to impossible questions. Who drugged them? Why force a bond? What had she been running from in that memory fragment? And the question she couldn't escape. What would happen when Draven discovered she was from Clearwater? That she'd been there the night his soldiers burned her home? Would he break the bond then? Would he finish what his army started 3 years ago? Lyra touched the mating mark on her neck, felt it pulse with warmth, with life, with a connection she never asked for but couldn't deny. Across the room, Draven's breathing had evened out. Not quite sleep, but close. She could feel him through the bond, his exhaustion, his confusion, his carefully controlled concern. Maybe the monster in her nightmares was more complicated than she'd thought. Maybe they both were. The journal arrived at dawn. A trembling kitchen maid delivered it directly to Draven. Refused to meet Lyra's eyes as she whispered her confession. "Found it in the chief advisor's office, Your Majesty. Thought you should know. He's been burning papers all morning." Draven pressed gold coins into her palm. "You've done well. Tell no one." After she left, Lyra stared at the leather-bound book like it might bite her journal, in Victor's possession. Her hands shook as she opened it. But the entries weren't what she remembered writing. Day 47. "Met him again in the medical wing. He pretends the nightmares don't haunt him, but I see the shadows under his eyes. Asked me to stay while he reviewed reports. Didn't speak for an hour, but the silence was comfortable. Strange how comfortable." Draven leaned over her shoulder. "Reading, day 47. That's 3 weeks before the bonding." Lyra's heart hammered. She had no memory of writing this, no memory of day 47, or the entries that followed. Pages and pages of midnight meetings, stolen conversations, the slow unfurling of something that looked dangerously like affection. Day 53. "He asked about my past today. I deflected, but he knew. He always knows when I'm hiding something. Said he understood carrying ghosts. The way he looked at me, like he saw all my broken pieces and didn't flinch. This isn't possible," Lyra breathed. "I would remember." "Bloodbane." Draven's voice was tight. "What if it wasn't just one night? What if we've been drugged multiple times?" She flipped forward, skimming entries that painted a picture of two people circling each other like wounded animals learning to trust. Her own words describing Draven's unexpected gentleness with refugees, his secret habit of visiting the medical wing after brutal counsel sessions, the way he listened when she talked about healing. Day 61, "I'm in love with him. God's help me, I'm in love with the man who destroyed my pack." The words hit like a physical blow. Lyra's vision swam. Draven had gone very still beside her. "Your pack." She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The entry continued. "He doesn't know, can never know. But when he looks at me like I'm something precious, I let myself pretend we could exist in a world where his orders didn't kill everyone I loved." What pack? Draven's voice was carefully controlled, but she felt his tension through the bond. "It doesn't matter. That's not what we need to focus on." A memory slammed into Draven. She felt it through their connection, saw it like she was there. Lyra's hands on his shoulder, warmth spreading through old battle damage, her voice soft and melodic, singing something in a language he didn't know, the pain that had plagued him for years melting away. Looking up to find her eyes shining with unshed tears. "The healer," he whispered, in the medical wing. "That was you." More memories surfaced, fragmentary but real. midnight conversations in the palace gardens. Her laugh, rare and precious, the way she'd challenged his assumptions about strength and mercy. How she'd made him feel human instead of just a weapon with a crown. We knew each other, Lyra said slowly, for weeks. We, she flipped to the final entry, dated the night before they woke bonded. If I do this, I'll be bound forever to the man who destroyed my home. But I'll save his life, and maybe that makes us even. Maybe that lets me forgive myself for surviving when they didn't. Victor plans to poison him at tomorrow's feast. I found the vials in the medical supply room. The bonding ritual is the only protection strong enough. He'll hate me when he learns the truth, but he'll be alive to hate me. Silence crashed between them. You performed the ritual, Draven said finally, to save my life. I don't remember. But the evidence was damning. We need to see the chapel. The ancient chapel sat in the oldest part of the palace, rarely used. Inside, the stone altar still bore dark stains. Draven knelt, touching them. Blood. Yours. Lyra felt drawn to the altar. Her fingers traced symbols carved into the stone. Protection. Binding. Life for life. This is a healer's ritual, she said quietly. Forbidden. It binds two life forces so completely that if one dies, the other follows. But it also means poison can't kill just one of you. The bond would purge it. You made yourself my shield. His voice carried something she couldn't name. Why? Because I fell in love with you. Because you're more than the orders you were given. Because I saw the man beneath the crown and he was worth saving. But she couldn't say any of that. I was investigating refugee disappearances, she said instead. The journal mentions it. Maybe I found something that connected to Victor's plot. Draven stood, moving closer. You called me insufferable in here. He tapped the journal, a hint of amusement breaking through the tension. Insufferably noble when I think no one's watching. Despite everything, Lyra felt heat creep up her neck. I was clearly drugged when I wrote that. Were you? He was close enough now that she could see gold flecks in his amber eyes. Or were you finally being honest? The air between them charged with something dangerous. His hand came up, fingers ghosting along her jaw, and Lyra's breath caught. She should pull away, should remember who he was, what he'd done. But the bond hummed between them. And in this moment, he wasn't the executioner. He was just Draven, looking at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for years. The chapel doors slammed open. Your Majesty, a guard, bloodied and panting, attack on the refugee settlement, multiple casualties. The medical wing, it's been burned. Lyra's world tilted. The medical wing where she'd been investigating, where she'd hidden evidence. Draven's hand dropped from her face, his expression hardening back into the king. How many dead? 7 confirmed. More injured. They locked eyes, and Lyra saw her own realization reflected in his gaze. This wasn't random. Someone was covering their tracks, and they'd just become the next targets. The refugee settlement sprawled beyond the palace walls like a wound that wouldn't heal. Makeshift tents, cooking fires that struggled against the wind. Children with hollow eyes who'd learned too young that the world was cruel. Lyra had avoided this place for 4 months, terrified of being recognized. Terrified that someone would see past her servant's disguise to the healer who'd survived when so many hadn't. Now Draven was leading her straight into her worst nightmare. The attack targeted specific tents, he explained as they walked. Guards flanked them on both sides. Families who'd recently arrived from border territories. Someone selecting victims. Lyra's throat tightened. She knew these faces. Not all of them, but enough. A woman drawing water wore the braided hairstyle of the northern packs. An elderly man had the distinctive tattoos of the forest clans. Survivors like her, cobbled together from a dozen destroyed communities. Then she saw Zara. Her childhood friend stood near a medical tent, organizing supplies with the same brisk efficiency Lyra remembered from before the world burned. 3 years older, thinner, harder, but unmistakably Zara Wilde. Their eyes met across the camp. Recognition flared in Zara's gaze, then carefully banked to neutrality. Smart, don't give me away. The healer's tent is this way, Draven said, not noticing the silent exchange. Inside was chaos. Injured refugees lay on cots while overwhelmed healers rushed between them, the air thick with the copper scent of blood and the sharper smell of fear. Burns, broken bones, smoke inhalation. The kind of injuries that came from fire and violence and deliberate cruelty. A child lay gray and still on a table. Couldn't be more than 5. Her mother sobbed beside her, clutching small hands that had gone cold. Smoke inhalation, a healer said grimly. Her lungs are too damaged. There's nothing more we can do. The words punched through Lyra's carefully constructed walls. Before she could think, before she could remember all the reasons she needed to hide her power. She was moving to the child's side. "Let me try." Draven's hand caught her wrist. "Lyra." His voice held warning, concern, a question he didn't voice. But she understood. If she did this, if she revealed what she truly was, there would be no going back. "Please," her eyes met his. Desperate. "Just let me try." He released her. Lyra placed her hands on the child's chest, closed her eyes. The healing gift unfurled inside her like wings spreading after years of being bound. Caged. Denied. She felt the damaged tissue, the fluid where it shouldn't be. The struggling heart that was seconds from giving up entirely. Power poured from her core. Golden and warm. Knitting, soothing, restoring. She felt it flow through her palms, into the child, chasing away death with light that had nothing to do with this world and everything to do with bloodlines older than memory. The child gasped. Her eyes flew open. Color flooded back into her cheeks as her mother's sobs turned to shock. Then joy. Then prayers in a language Lyra had thought died with Clearwater. When Lyra finally stepped back, trembling from the exertion, the medical tent had gone silent. Every healer stared at her, eyes wide, mouths open, because what she'd just done was impossible. No ordinary healer could pull someone back from death's door. No common wolf had power that manifested as visible light. And Draven. Draven was looking at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "That signature," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I've felt it before." Lyra's stomach dropped. She'd been too reckless, too desperate to save a life. Now he'd recognize the Clearwater battle, would know she'd been there, would understand that the woman bonded to him was connected to one of his greatest regrets. The reports mentioned a healer with unusual power. His voice was barely a whisper. Golden light that could pull soldiers back from death's door. "That was you." She couldn't speak, couldn't deny it. "Your Majesty." Zara appeared at Draven's elbow, her tone respectful but firm. "Perhaps we could speak privately about the recent disappearances." Draven's gaze lingered on Lyra another moment before he nodded. "Of course." While he moved to the far side of the tent with Zara, Lyra sank onto a stool, her hands still shaking. The mother pressed a cup of water into her fingers, whispering thanks that made Lyra's eyes burn. "He knows you're Clearwater," Zara said when she returned moments later, keeping her voice low. "I didn't confirm it, but he's not stupid. What did you tell him about the disappearances?" "Truth." Zara's expression was grave. 15 refugees gone in 3 months, all gifted, and all from packs that were destroyed in the last 5 years. "Lyra, someone's hunting us, the survivors. And now you're bonded to the king who led half those campaigns. He was being used, manipulated by Victor." Zara's eyebrow rose. "You're defending him." Was she 4 months ago, the thought would have been impossible. But she'd read her own words in that journal, had felt his genuine confusion and horror at the conspiracy. Watched him now as he crouched beside refugees, listening to their stories with a gentleness that didn't match his reputation. A toddler approached Draven, crying. The king looked panicked, then attempted what could only be described as a facial expression meant to be comforting. It looked more like he was having a stroke. The child cried harder. "Your Majesty," Lyra called, biting back a smile despite everything. "You're terrifying the children. I'm trying to be friendly." His indignation was so genuine, so far from the cold executioner of legend that Lyra laughed, actually laughed, a sound she hadn't made in 3 years. Draven's face softened at the sound, something warm kindling in his eyes that made her breath catch. Made her forget for just a moment and that this was the man who'd ordered her world destroyed. Later, as the sun set and they prepared to return to the palace, Lyra spotted a child playing with a carved wooden wolf. The craftsmanship was distinctive, paw raised, howling at an invisible moon. Her brother had carried one exactly like it. Their father had made them matching sets before the night everything burned. The grief hit like a wave, sudden, brutal, unexpected. And suddenly she couldn't breathe, couldn't see past the memories. Fire, screaming. Her mother's voice cut short, her father's last command to run. Kael's small hand torn from hers in the chaos. Her knees buckled. Draven was there, catching her, pulling her against his chest as sobs tore from her throat. 3 years of buried pain finally breaking through walls she'd built to survive. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I'm sorry, I can't." "You don't have to tell me." His arms tightened around her. "Solid and warm, but you don't have to carry it alone either." They stood like that as the sun bled red across the horizon. Two broken people learning that maybe, just maybe, they could hold each other's pieces. That evening, back in Draven's chambers, Lyra found him standing by the window, rolling his shoulder with barely concealed discomfort. "The old wound?" she asked softly. He nodded, not turning. She crossed to him slowly. giving him time to refuse. When he didn't, she placed her hands on his shoulder. The healing warmth flowed again, gentler this time, easing chronic pain that had lived in his body for years. Draven's eyes closed, his breath released in a shudder. "You could have let me suffer," he said quietly. "After everything. Healing isn't about what people deserve." Lyra's voice was steady. "It's about what they need." When she finished, his hand covered hers on his shoulder. Their first truly consensual touch. The bond sang between them, and for the first time neither of them pulled away. Then his hand tightened. "Lyra, you need to tell me, what pack were you from?" She froze, heart hammering. "The wound I just healed," he turned to face her. "I got it 3 years ago. During the Clearwater campaign, a healer struck me. Same signature I feel in your power. You were there. It wasn't a question." Lyra pulled her hand back, wrapped her arms around herself. "Yes, tell me what happened." "Please, no." Her voice cracked. "You don't get to ask me that. You don't get to make me relive. I need to know what I did." Draven's amber eyes held pain that matched her own. "I need to understand what orders I gave, what I'm responsible for." "You want to know?" Lyra's grief turned to anger, hot and fierce. "Fine, I'll tell you about Clearwater." She took a breath, forced herself to speak past the lump in her throat. "I was 21, a healer. I had a family, a home. We weren't insurgents. We weren't planning rebellion. We were farmers, craftsmen, teachers, people who just wanted to live in peace." Draven's face had gone pale, but he didn't interrupt. "Your soldiers came at midnight, set fire to the homes while people slept, cut down anyone who tried to escape. I watched my mother die trying to protect the children, watched my father fall defending the healer's hall. I lost my little brother in the chaos. KL, he was 14. I thought he burned." Her voice broke, but she forced herself to continue. "I survived because I hid, because I was a coward. I could hear them screaming, and I did nothing. When dawn came, everything was ash. 300 people dead, and I was the only healer left." The silence that followed was suffocating. "I was told it was a military target," Draven said finally, his voice hollow. "Insurgents planning an attack on the capital. Victor showed me intelligence reports, weapon caches, training camps. I believed him. That doesn't change what happened." Lyra's tears had stopped, leaving only cold acceptance. "Your belief doesn't bring them back." "No, it doesn't." Draven's jaw clenched. "But I need you to know. If I had known about the civilians, about the families, I would never have given that order. But you did give it, and Lyra was so tired of carrying this alone. And 300 people died because you didn't question, didn't verify, didn't care enough to make sure. You're right." His voice was quiet. "Absolute. I failed them, failed you, and I'll carry that for the rest of my life." Before Lyra could respond, urgent knocking shattered the moment. A guard burst in, bloodied, frantic. "Your Majesty, we found something. Victor's office. You need to see this now." The hidden safe behind Victor's eastern bookshelf opened with a click that sounded like doom. Inside were ledgers, dozens of them, organized by year going back 2 decades. Draven pulled them out with shaking hands, spread them across Victor's desk. Lyra's healing-enhanced vision caught details instantly. Names, ages, gifts, prices. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. They weren't military records. They were inventory lists, gifted wolves cataloged like livestock, with notations of which foreign nation had purchased them. Children as young as 6. Healers, seers, elementals, anyone with power worth selling. Clearwater Pack," Draven read, his voice hollow. "Listed as hostile insurgency in official records. But here," he tapped a ledger entry, his finger trembling. "Here it says harvested for high-value gifts. 17 healers acquired, 9 seers, 23 elementals. Sold to he couldn't finish, couldn't voice the horror spreading across the pages." Lyra's hands trembled as she flipped through more ledgers. So many names, so many families destroyed not for rebellion or threat, but for profit. Pack after pack labeled as military targets. Actually harvested for Victor's trafficking ring. The campaigns, Draven said, understanding crushing him. "Every campaign I led, the border conflicts, the insurgent threats, they were all fabricated. I thought I was protecting the kingdom. I've been enabling a monster." He sank into a chair, head in his hands. The great Alpha King reduced to a broken man confronting what he'd become. Lyra almost went to him, almost offered comfort. But then her eyes caught a familiar name in the most recent ledger. KL Ashwood, age 17, healer, high value, sold to Northern Territories for military medical corps. The world tilted. Her baby brother, The one she'd watched disappear into smoke and flame. The one she'd grieved for 3 years. Except he hadn't died. He'd survived. Had been taken. Had spent 3 years enslaved because she'd failed to protect him. A sound escaped her throat. Something between a sob and a scream. The ledger slipped from her fingers. Draven was there before she hit the floor, catching her, pulling her against his chest as she shattered. "I'm sorry," he choked out, his own tears falling into her hair. "Lyra, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I should have known. Should have questioned. Should have. He's alive." She couldn't stop saying it. Kale's alive. They stayed like that. Two people drowning in horror and hope. Until the pragmatic part of Lyra's brain kicked in. She pulled back, wiping her eyes, forcing herself to think. There's more here. She grabbed another ledger. Summit schedule, final feast in tomorrow night. Her finger traced a notation in Victor's handwriting. Bloodbane in the king's wine. Blamed on new queen's unstable foreign magic. Victor assumes regency. Draven's expression hardened into something dangerous. He planned this before we even bonded. But I performed the ritual. Lyra's mind raced. The bonding protects you. Poison can't kill you without killing me too. And he needs me alive to take the blame. So he sent assassins instead. When that failed, he'll try something else. Something public at the feast that can't be traced back to him. They stared at each other, the pieces falling into terrible place. "We expose him," Draven said, "publicly at the feast, with evidence. He has allies, guards loyal to him, half the council. Then we make sure the truth is undeniable." Draven's gaze was steady. "You can sense lies through touch. Can you do it for a crowd? Make them feel what you feel." Lyra had never tried, but desperate times. Maybe, if I push hard enough. The diplomatic dinner was supposed to be routine. Representatives from 3 allied pacts, sharing wine and carefully worded treaties. Lyra sat at Draven's right, wearing a borrowed gown that made her feel like an imposter playing queen. Then the first window shattered. Glass exploded inward. A diplomat's scream cut short as a dart found his throat. The acrid smell of poison filled the air. Chaos. Masked figures dropped from the ceiling, blades flashing in candlelight, moving with practiced precision toward the high table, toward Draven. Draven moved before Lyra could process the threat. His body slammed hers to the floor. His weight pressed her down, protective and immovable, even as he roared orders to scattered guards. "Stay down," he commanded. Then he was up, weaponless, using a chair leg to block an assassin's knife, fighting like the weapon his father had trained him to be. Brutal efficiency, no wasted movement. But he was outnumbered. 6 attackers, maybe more. His guards pinned at the doorway by crossbow fire. An assassin broke through Draven's defense, blade aimed at his unprotected back. Lyra didn't think, didn't plan. Error transformed into something white-hot and blazing. Power erupted from her core, not the gentle healing warmth, but something fierce and terrible. She felt the assassin's life force like a flame. Reached for it. Squeezed. The man collapsed, his heart simply stopping. The blade clattered from his fingers. The room went still. Every eye turned to Lyra, who stood trembling, her hands glowing with golden light that flickered at the edges with something darker. Something that had nothing to do with healing and everything to do with the other side of that power. The side that could unmake as easily as it made. "Lyra!" Draven's voice cut through her shock. "Behind you." She spun. Another assassin lunged. This time she was ready. Her hand shot out, connecting with his chest. She felt his life beneath her palm, the rhythm of his heart, the flow of blood, the spark that made him alive. It would be so easy to snuff it out. Instead, she pushed healing into him. Too much, overwhelming. His nervous system overloaded. He crumpled, unconscious but breathing. The remaining assassins hesitated, then fled when palace guards finally broke through. In the aftermath, as servants rushed to tend the wounded and guards secured the room, Lyra stood frozen. She'd almost killed him, had killed one. Her hands shook as she stared at the fallen assassin, the one whose heart she'd stopped. "He's dead," she whispered. "I killed him. He was trying to kill you." Draven approached slowly, like she was a spooked animal. "You defended yourself. I'm a healer." I can't." Her knees buckled. Draven caught her, and in her distress power leaked from her uncontrolled. It flowed into him, seeking damage to fix, finding the old battle wounds he'd carried for years. Scar tissue dissolved, nerve damage repaired, the chronic ache in his ribs from a blow that never quite healed. Gone. Draven sucked in a sharp breath as decades of pain simply vanished. "That signature," he said, his voice rough. "It's identical to the reports from Clearwater. The healer who saved dozens of soldiers before he stopped." Understanding dawning in his eyes. "You were there when my army came. You were there. Lyra couldn't deny it anymore. Couldn't hide. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because you ordered the attack. The words burst from her. 3 years of grief and rage finally finding voice. Your soldiers burned my home, killed my family. And you want to know why I didn't tell you I was there? The room had gone silent. Diplomats and guards alike stared at the revelation unfolding before them. Draven's face had gone pale. The Clearwater campaign. You're from Clearwater Pack. I'm the last one, her voice cracked. Everyone else died or was taken, or she couldn't finish, couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. A diplomat who'd fainted during the attack chose that moment to sit up, straightening his jacket with exaggerated dignity. I want it noted that my unconsciousness was a tactical retreat. Draven's response was automatic, his tone dry despite the tension. From consciousness ambassador. Precisely. The absurdity of it broke something in the moment. Guards coughed to hide laughs. But Draven's attention never left Lyra. We need to question the survivor, he said finally, gesturing to the assassin whose heart Lyra had stopped. Before we do anything else, he's dead. I killed him. Then bring him back. Draven's gaze was steady, certain. You can do it. I know you can. Lyra wanted to refuse, but they needed answers. Needed to know who'd sent assassins to a diplomatic dinner. She knelt beside the body, placed her hands on his chest, reaching for the spark of life she'd extinguished. It was like grabbing smoke. Intangible. Already fading, she pulled, commanded, begged. The healing power surged through her, and suddenly she was crying. Pouring everything she had into calling him back, the man gasped. His eyes flew open. He lived. Lyra swayed, exhausted. Draven caught her. As he helped her stand, his sleeve rode up, revealing the scars on her forearms, burn marks, distinctive patterns from Clearwater fires. His fingers traced them with devastating gentleness. You were there when my soldiers came. His voice broke. What did I do to you? The question hung between them, raw and bleeding. Lyra couldn't answer, couldn't find words for the night her world had burned, for the screams that still echoed in her nightmares, for the impossible cruelty of falling in love with the man who'd ordered it all. Instead, she pulled away, wrapped her arms around herself, watched as guards dragged the resurrected assassin away for questioning. The assassin lasted 4 hours before he broke. Lyra sat across from him in the palace dungeons, her hand pressed against his chest, feeling every flutter of his heartbeat, every spike of fear when he lied. Draven stood behind her, a silent, imposing presence. Who hired you? She asked again. The man's pulse jumped. Lie incoming. I don't know. We received payment through Lyra's power pulsed, just enough to make his heart skip. His eyes widened with terror. Try again, she said softly. And remember, I brought you back once. I can take you away just as easily. She hated the words even as she spoke them, hated what she was becoming. But lives depended on the truth. Victor Graves, the assassin, gasped. The chief advisor. He hired us. Said the king had become compromised by his new wife. Said the kingdom needed protection. Draven's hand came down on Lyra's shoulder, steadying. Where's his proof? His evidence office safe. Hidden behind the eastern bookshelf. Combination is your father's death date. They left the assassin to the guards and ran. But when they reached Victor's office, Draven froze in the doorway. Seraphina Blackwell stood beside the already open safe. Beautiful. Aristocratic. The woman the council had chosen to be Draven's mate before Lyra appeared. Her smile was poison wrapped in silk. Your Majesty, she purred, and the little refugee, how domestic. Seraphina, Draven's voice was ice. Step away from that safe. Or what? Her laugh was cruel. You'll choose this lowborn nothing over me, over your kingdom's future. She pulled documents from the safe, started ripping them, feeding them to the fireplace. She's not nothing. Draven's power filled the room, making the air thick. She is my mate, my queen, and you will show her respect or I will have you removed from this court. Seraphina's face twisted with rage. She's Clearwater trash. She seduced you with Lyra's hand shot out. Golden light wrapped around Seraphina's wrist, not hurting, just holding, making her freeze mid-motion. I am Lyra Ashwood, she said quietly, last healer of Clearwater Pack, the woman bonded to your king. And if you insult me again, I'll show you exactly what Clearwater healers can do when we're done being merciful. The light pulsed, just once. Seraphina's face went white. Draven pulled Lyra back gently. Seraphina, you're dismissed. Permanently. Pack your things and leave the palace before dawn. Or I'll let her finish what she started. After Seraphina fled, they salvaged what documents remained. Enough to prove conspiracy. Enough to expose Victor, but not enough to prove where Kyle was held. We go to Northern Territories, Draven said. Tonight, we get your brother back. It's suicide. Victor will know we left. He'll move up his timeline. Then we'd better be fast. They left at midnight. 10 elite guards, moving through darkness toward enemy territory. Lyra rode beside Draven, fear and hope warring in her chest. Tell me about him, Draven said quietly. Your brother, K.O. Lyra's voice softened. He was 14 when it happened, always getting into trouble, collecting injured animals, driving our mother crazy with his questions. He wanted to be a healer like me, practiced on everything, birds, rabbits. Once tried to heal a rock because he thought it looked sad. Draven's mouth quirked. A rock. He was special. Is special, Lyra corrected herself. If he's been enslaved for 3 years, we'll get him back, Draven promised, and Victor will pay for every child he's stolen. The bond pulsed between them, warm, certain. And Lyra realized she believed him, not because she'd forgiven what he'd done, but because she'd seen who he was trying to become. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it had to be. The Northern Territories compound loomed ahead, and Lyra sent a silent prayer to God she'd stopped believing in 3 years ago. Let K.O. be alive. Let us not be too late. Let this be the beginning of something better. The gates opened, and they rode into uncertain darkness. The Northern Territories compound rose from darkness like a fortress carved from stone and spite. Walls 30 feet high, guard towers at every corner. The scent of blood and iron thick in the air. This was where gifted wolves came to disappear, where children were broken into weapons, where Kael had spent 3 years learning that hope was a luxury slaves couldn't afford. Lyra's hands trembled on the reins. Draven's horse moved closer, his presence steady beside her. We're getting him back. Not a promise, a certainty, like he could will it into existence through sheer force of command. The gates opened, not with resistance, but with calculated welcome. They'd been expected. Alpha Nikolai Volkov waited in the courtyard, massive, scarred, built like violence-given flesh. His eyes were winter blue, cold enough to freeze blood. But when he looked at Lyra, something flickered. Recognition, maybe. Or curiosity about the healer who'd bonded herself to the executioner king. Draven Sinclair Nikolai's voice was gravel and smoke. You bring an interesting proposal, evidence that could destroy us both. In exchange for one broken slave. He's not broken. Lyra spoke before Draven could. He's 17. His name is Kael, and he's my brother. Nikolai's gaze sharpened. So the rumors are true. Clearwater healer. I wondered who'd survived that particular harvest. The word made Lyra's stomach turn. Harvest. Like people were crops to be reaped and sold. I have a counter offer, Nikolai continued. Prove your power. Heal something I've been told is beyond saving. Do that, and your brother walks free. The evidence becomes irrelevant. What needs healing? Draven's hand had moved to his sword, ready for betrayal. My daughter. Nikolai's mask cracked, just for a moment, showing the desperate father beneath the brutal alpha. Silver poisoning. 5 years of watching her die slowly. Every healer I've brought says there's nothing to be done. Lyra understood then. This wasn't about negotiation. It was about a father willing to bargain with enemies if it meant saving his child. Take me to her. The girl was 10, maybe 11. Hard to tell when suffering aged you beyond your years. She lay in a bed too large for her small frame. Skin gray as ash, breathing shallow. The silver poisoning had spread through her entire system, turning her blood toxic, shutting down organs one by one. Her name was Katya, and she was dying. This is impossible, a healer whispered. The silver's integrated too deeply. If you try to remove it, you'll kill her. Lyra placed her hands on Katya's chest, closed her eyes, felt the poison like black ice in the girl's veins. The healer was right. This should be impossible. Removing the silver would tear apart everything it had fused with. But Lyra wasn't just a healer. She was Clearwater. And Clearwater healers didn't just mend. They transformed, broke down and rebuilt, unmade and remade. It was why Victor had targeted her pack. Why 17 healers had been worth massacring 300 people. Power poured from her core. Golden light erupted, brighter than before. Hotter. She felt it flow into Katya, felt the poison fight back. But Lyra was stronger. She wrapped her power around each molecule of silver, coaxed it, convinced it, separated it from flesh and bone and blood. The process took 2 hours. 2 hours of Lyra pouring herself into a stranger's child, feeling Draven's hand on her shoulder, anchoring her through the bond when she started to drift. When the healing tried to pull her so deep she might not find her way back. Finally, the last trace of silver expelled through Katya's pores. Lyra opened her eyes, swaying, exhausted, but the girl's color was already returning. her breathing evening out. Katya's eyes fluttered open. Papa Nikolai dropped to his knees beside the bed, gathered his daughter in his arms. For a moment, the brutal alpha was just a father holding his miracle. When he looked at Lyra, his eyes were wet. You have your deal. The boy is yours. They brought KL out in chains. Lyra's breath stopped. Her baby brother, 17 now, taller than she remembered, broader. But his eyes were empty, hollowed out, like someone had scooped away everything that made him KL and left only a shell. Scars covered his arms, his neck, marks from silver restraints, from punishments, from 3 years of Victor's people breaking him down until there was nothing left to break. Kale Lyra whispered. She ran to him, reached for him. It's me. It's Lyra. You're safe now. He stared at her. Through her, no recognition, no emotion, nothing. He doesn't speak anymore, Nikolai said quietly. Whatever Victor's people did to his mind, they made sure he wouldn't come back from it. No. Lyra cupped her brother's face. Kale, please. Look at me. See me. Nothing. Draven moved beside her. Can you heal this the way you healed my wounds? This isn't a wound, Lyra's voice broke. This is psychological trauma, conditioning. His mind built walls to survive what they did to him. If I go in there and try to force them down, you could trap yourself, Draven finished. I know, but if you don't try, he stays like this forever. Lyra looked at her brother, at the empty eyes, at the boy who'd once tried to heal rocks because they looked sad. I have to try. She placed her hands on both sides of Kikel's head, closed her eyes, dove into his mind. The psychic landscape was a wasteland, memories locked behind walls of ice, emotions frozen. Everything that made Kael himself buried so deep it might as well have been dead. Lyra pushed deeper, following threads of consciousness, looking for the core, the part that couldn't be destroyed no matter how much they tried. She found it in a memory. Kael at 7. Lyra teaching him to heal, her hands guiding his, their mother singing in the background, their father carving wooden wolves by firelight, the family whole, happy, before the world learned how to burn. Lyra held on to that memory, poured warmth into it, let it grow, let it spread, melting the ice walls, thawing frozen emotions, calling her brother back from the place he'd hidden himself to survive. Come back, she whispered into the darkness. Kale, come home. For a moment, nothing, then a flicker, a spark, a small voice in the void. Ellie, her childhood nickname, the one only family used. I'm here, she said. I've got you. It's safe now. The walls shattered, memories flooded back, good and bad, beautiful and terrible. Kale's consciousness surged forward, reaching for her, reaching for home. Lyra pulled them both out, back to the physical world, where Draven held her body upright, where Nikolai and his guards watched, where her brother's eyes were finally focused on her face. Ellie Kale's voice was rough, broken from disuse. Is it really you? Lyra collapsed into him, sobbing. It's me. I'm here. I've got you. They held each other, brother and sister, both broken, both surviving, both learning that sometimes coming home meant carrying new scars. Before they left, KL spoke, his voice stronger. Victor, he has insurance, bombs throughout the palace, dead man switch. If his heart stops, everything explodes. How do you know this? Draven asked. He told me. KL's hands shook. Before they broke me, said he needed leverage, needed a way to keep the king in line. He has kill switches everywhere. Can you remember where the bombs are? KL closed his eyes, trying. Medical wing, throne room, armory, dungeons, maybe more. The conditioning, it fragments everything. It's enough, Lyra said. We can work with this. Draven's expression was grim. We need to get back. The feast is in 18 hours. They rode through the night. KL sat behind Lyra, arms wrapped around her waist, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. She could feel him trembling, could feel 3 years of trauma trying to surface now that the walls were down. It's okay, she murmured. You're safe. I won't let anyone hurt you again. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'll die trying to keep you safe. Behind them, Draven rode in grim silence, planning, calculating, preparing for the confrontation that would either save the kingdom or destroy them all. When they reached the palace at dawn, Zara was waiting. The older woman took one look at Kael and understood. She gathered him into her arms, didn't ask questions, just held him while he finally let himself break. I've got him, Zara said to Lyra. You focus on stopping Victor. I'll keep your brother safe. Lyra kissed Kael's forehead. I'll come back. I promise. In Draven's bright chambers, they had 12 hours to prepare. The plan was simple. Expose Victor publicly at the feast, with evidence too overwhelming to deny. Force him to surrender before he could activate the bombs. Get him to reveal the dead man's switch locations. Then make sure he never hurt another child again. Simple, but not easy. What if he doesn't surrender? Lyra asked. What if he'd rather blow up the palace than lose? Then we make him see reason. Draven pulled her close, his arms strong around her. We show him that his empire has already fallen, that fighting only makes it worse. And if that doesn't work, then I stop his heart, Lyra said quietly. Keep him in a loop, dying and reviving, until he tells us where every bomb is hidden. That could damage you, using your power that way. I know, but it's necessary. Draven cupped her face, his amber eyes intense. After this is over, after Victor is dealt with and the kingdom is safe, I want you to know something. What I love you. His voice was raw, honest. Not because of the bond, not because of the ritual, but because you're the strongest person I've ever met. Because you chose mercy when vengeance would have been easier. Because you saved me in every way a person can be saved. Lyra's breath caught. I love you too. God's help me. I love the man who destroyed my world, and I'm choosing to build a new one with him. They kissed, soft at first, then deeper, pouring 3 weeks of stolen memories and 3 years of grief and hope for a future that might actually be worth living into that single moment. When they pulled apart, Draven rested his forehead against hers. Let's go save a kingdom. The great hall blazed with candlelight and the dangerous glitter of political ambition. Leaders from 5 neighboring pacts sat around the massive table, their advisors and guards positioned along the walls. Victor orchestrated seating with practiced ease, placed Lyra beside Draven like a trophy, like proof that the foreign queen was tamed, controlled. He had no idea what was coming. Lyra wore Clearwater purple, the royal color of her destroyed pack, a choice that made Victor's eye twitch when she entered. Good, let him be unsettled. Let him wonder what game she was playing. The first courses passed without incident, diplomatic small talk, careful compliments, the dance of wolves pretending to be sheep. Then Draven stood. Before we feast, he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. I have revelations about our kingdom's true nature, about the campaigns I've led, and the man who's advised me for 20 years. Victor's smile never wavered, but Lyra saw his hand move, signaling someone in the shadows. The wine service began. A servant approached Draven with a crystal goblet, dark red wine catching the light. Through the bond, Lyra felt Draven's recognition. The same servant who'd been in Victor's office, the one who'd tried to poison him before. Lyra's hand shot out, closed around the cup before it reached Draven's lips. Their eyes met, silent communication flowing through the bond. Trust me. She drank. The poison hit her system like liquid fire. Bloodbane and heartspin mixed together, designed to stop a wolf's heart in seconds. Around the table, conversation died as Lyra's body began to convulse. But she'd been preparing for this. Had spent 2 days studying the poison's composition, understanding how it worked. And if she could stop a heart, she could save her own. Golden light erupted from her skin. The assembled leaders gasped. Chairs scraped back. Guards reached for weapons. But Lyra was already metabolizing the poison in real time. Her healing gift manifesting visibly. Power blazing through her veins. Breaking down the toxins. Expelling them as harmless waste. Black smoke poured from her mouth. From her skin. The poison made visible as it left her system. When the light faded, Lyra stood. Steady. The empty goblet in her hand. Bloodbane and heartspin, she said clearly. The same poison found in Victor Graves's private collection. The same poison used in multiple assassination attempts on the king. Victor Draven's voice cut through the stunned silence, carrying the full weight of his authority. You are accused of treason, trafficking of gifted wolves, and attempted regicide. Victor's practiced smile never wavered. Your Majesty, I don't know what lies. We found the ledgers, Draven gestured. Guards brought forward the evidence. 20 years of records, spread across the table for all to see. Every campaign you sent me on, every rebellion I crushed, all fabricated to harvest gifted wolves for your trafficking ring. The assembled leaders leaned forward, scanning the documents. Lyra watched recognition dawn on their faces. Their own missing pack members listed like inventory. These are forgeries, Victor said smoothly. Obviously planted by whom, Lyra interrupted, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. By me, the refugee servant you married to your king as a scapegoat, or by the assassins you sent when that plan failed. Victor's mask finally cracked. His hand moved in a gesture Lyra recognized too late. A signal. Guards along the walls turned on their own. 20 men who'd served the palace for years suddenly drew weapons, eyes glazed with magical compulsion, moving with mechanical precision toward Draven. Victor's triumphant sneer said everything. Did you really think I'd come unprepared? He purred. The king dies. The unstable foreign queen goes mad with grief. And I restore order as regent. It's already written. Then chaos erupted. Draven moved with lethal grace. Disarmed the nearest guard, used the man's sword to block incoming strikes. Lyra backed toward him, and suddenly they were moving together. The bond allowing them to fight in perfect synchronization. Where he struck, she defended. Where she sensed danger, he was already moving. A diplomat dove under the banquet table, still clutching his dinner roll. If I'm dying, he announced, I'm dying full. Lyra would have laughed if she wasn't currently ducking a blade aimed at her throat. She reached for her gift, felt the life forces of the corrupted guards. The compulsion sat on their minds like a parasite, foreign and invasive. If she could heal wounds, maybe she could heal this. Golden light exploded from her again, but this time it spread. Washing over the attacking guards in a wave, Lyra felt their minds beneath her touch, found the threads of Victor's magic, and burned them away. One by one, the guards stumbled, confusion replacing the blank compulsion. They looked at their drawn weapons with horror, then at Victor with rage. What did you do to us? One guard demanded. What was necessary? Victor snarled, backing toward the exit. The kingdom needs strength, not some fool who gardens and writes poetry. He didn't make it to the door. His own guards blocked his path, the ones Lyra had just freed. I think not, the captain said quietly. Traitor. As they restrained Victor, the great hall fell silent, every eye on Draven, waiting for judgment, for explanation, for truth. Draven stepped forward, and Lyra saw what it cost him, this proud, isolated king about to lay himself bare before enemies and allies alike. I led the Clearwater campaign, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. I believed the lies I was told, that they were insurgents, threats to the kingdom. But ignorance is not innocence. His gaze swept the assembled leaders. I am responsible for the deaths of innocent wolves, children, healers, families. I will abdicate if he turned to Lyra, if she wishes it. I will submit to whatever justice she deems fit. The hall held its breath. Lyra stepped forward, took Draven's hand in front of everyone, and spoke loud enough for all to hear. I am Lyra Ashwood of Clearwater Pack. I watched my home burn, lost my family, spent 3 years hiding because I thought the man who gave those orders was a monster. She met Draven's eyes, but I was wrong. He's not a monster. He's a weapon that was aimed by someone else, and I choose mercy for him, for us, for everyone in this room who's lost someone to Victor's greed. She turned to face the gathered leaders. I don't want justice. I want change. I want a kingdom where healers are valued, where gifted wolves are protected, where power is used to build instead of destroy. And I want him, she squeezed Draven's hand, to help me build it. Silence stretched. Then the Alpha of the Eastern Territories stood, followed by another leader and another. One by one they rose in acceptance. The bond stands, the Eastern Alpha declared, and Victor Graves will face trial before all 5 territories for his crimes. Victor lunged, pulled something from his jacket. A detonator. One move and I blow the palace. His voice was manic, desperate. Everyone dies, or you let me walk. Entire hall froze. Lyra felt Draven's tension through the bond, felt him calculating, preparing to sacrifice himself if necessary. No, she whispered, I have a better idea. She stepped toward Victor, hands raised, no weapons, just power thrumming beneath her skin. Take me instead, she offered. You wanted gifted healers. I'm the most powerful you'll ever find. Let everyone else go. Keep me as your hostage. Victor's eyes narrowed, suspicious. Why would you? Because if you kill Draven, the bond kills me anyway. Lyra moved closer. But if you let him live, I'll serve you, heal your people, make you unstoppable. Victor considered. Greed winning over caution. Fine, the king lives. But you come with me. Now, Lyra walked to Victor, close enough to touch, close enough for skin contact. The moment his hand closed around her wrist, she struck. Power flooded into him, not healing, overwhelming, drowning him in sensation. In her consciousness diving into his. What are you? Victor screamed. I'm in your mind now, Lyra said calmly. Show me where the bombs are. She felt him try to push her out, but she was stronger. 3 years of survival had made her stronger than anyone realized. She ripped through his mental defenses, tore into memories, found what she needed. Throne room, medical wing, armory, dungeons, exactly where Kale said they'd be. Her eyes found Zara in the crowd. The silent communication passed. Zara nodded, ran. Victor broke free, threw Lyra across the room. She hit the wall, breath knocked from her lungs, but she'd gotten what she needed. Draven was there, pulling her up. Victor pulled a blade, lunged. They fought. Alpha against advisor, king against traitor. Brutal and vicious, until Draven disarmed him. Held him at sword point. It's over, Draven said. Surrender. Never. Victor's finger moved toward a second detonator. Lyra's hand shot out. Golden light wrapped around Victor's heart. Stopped it. Mid-beat. He collapsed. Not dead, suspended. Caught between life and death. Zara burst back in, breathless. All bombs disarmed, every single one. Lyra released her hold slightly. Let Victor's heart beat once. Twice. Then stopped it again. Where are the rest, she demanded. Every bomb you planted, every failsafe. Tell me or I keep you in this loop forever. Victor gasped, choked, finally broke. Servant quarters? Sub-basement. Garden walls, that's all. That's everything. Zara's team confirmed. 30 minutes later, every location clear. Lyra looked down at Victor, this man who'd stolen children, destroyed packs. Used Draven as a weapon for 20 years. Sleep, she said, and let Victor's heart restart, but pushed healing into him. Too much, forcing unconsciousness deep and dreamless. He'll wake in a cell, she told the guards, where he belongs. The council convened for 3 days, debating, arguing, deciding the fate of a king who'd been deceived in a kingdom that needed rebuilding. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Draven would remain king, but under council oversight, with new laws protecting gifted wolves, with reparations for destroyed packs, and with Lyra at his side, not as a political pawn, but as his equal, his Luna, his queen. The coronation happened in the Clearwater Memorial Garden. Lyra had insisted. If she was going to wear a crown, it would be among the dead, among those who'd paid the price for Victor's greed, among her people. Draven knelt before her as the sun set, his voice carrying to the assembled crowd. Lyra Ashwood, you saved my life, my kingdom, my soul. You chose mercy when vengeance would have been easier. You built gardens where others saw only graves. He placed a crown on her head, silver woven with purple stones, Clearwater colors forever honored. You are my Luna, he said, my queen, my everything. And before all the territories I claim you, not as property, but as partner, not as possession, but as the other half of my heart. He stood, cupped her face, and kissed her as the crowd erupted in cheers. Mine, he whispered against her lips. Ours, she corrected. This kingdom, this future, this chance to make it right, it belongs to all of us. The assembled territories knelt, not in subjugation, but in acceptance, in hope. Luna Queen Lyra, they intoned, long may she reign. 6 months later, the Clearwater Memorial Garden had grown into something beautiful. 500 moonstone markers arranged in spiraling patterns, each name carved with a care, each life remembered. Night-blooming jasmine surrounded them, flowers that opened in darkness, proving that even in grief there was beauty. Lyra stood among the markers, her hand on the final stone, her mother's name. Kale stood beside her. 17 now, still healing but stronger every day. He'd found purpose teaching at the New Healing Academy, helping other traumatized young wolves learn that their gifts were strength, not weakness. You would have loved this place, Lyra said to her mother's stone. The garden, the academy, what we're building. She does love it, Kale said quietly. I can feel it. They're all here, watching. Proud. Lyra squeezed his hand. Behind them, the academy hummed with activity. 30 students, refugees and nobles learning side by side. Zara ran the refugee integration program, helping survivors find homes, find purpose, find peace. Victor's trial had been public. His crimes laid bare before all 5 territories. The sentence was unanimous. Life imprisonment in the very mines where he'd sold children. Forced labor. No parole. No mercy. Serafina Blackwell had fled to the Eastern Territories, banned from ever returning. A small footnote in a much larger story of justice and rebuilding. The gifted protection laws had passed. Trafficking now carried the death penalty. Every pack had agreed. Too many had lost too much to Victor's schemes. And Northern Territories had become an unexpected ally. Nikolai's daughter Katya had recovered fully. The Alpha now worked with Draven to dismantle the remaining trafficking networks, to free those still enslaved. 73 gifted wolves had been rescued in 6 months, each one finding sanctuary, finding hope, finding home. Your Majesty, a servant approached. The guests are arriving for the ceremony. Lyra touched her mother's marker one last time, then turned toward the palace. toward the future. The second bonding ceremony was smaller than the first, more intimate. Just family and close friends gathered in the memorial garden, where the dead could witness the living choosing love. Lyra wore royal purple, clear watercolors now officially adopted as part of the kingdom's crest. Draven wore mourning black, honoring those lost, acknowledging the weight of the pestis while stepping into the future. Kael stood as Lyra's witness. Zara stood as Draven's. The symmetry felt right. The vows were simple. I choose you, Lyra said, with full knowledge, full memory, full heart. Not because the bond demands it, but because you're worth choosing every day, for the rest of my life. I choose you, Draven echoed, not to erase the past, but to build a future worthy of those we've lost, not to forget the pain, but to transform it into something that heals instead of harms. They exchanged rings, not the silver bands from the forced bonding, but new ones, engraved with Clearwater and Sinclair symbols intertwined. Each guest had received a gift as they arrived, a small moonstone wolf token, each carved with a victim's name, so the lost would be present, even those who couldn't attend in body. The ceremony ended with a traditional Clearwater blessing, sung in the old language, the words speaking of hope and healing and gardens that grew from graves. When Lyra and Draven kissed, the entire garden seemed to glow. Moonstone catching the fading light, jasmine releasing its scent, a moment of perfect peace. That evening, they stood on the balcony of their chambers, looking out over the kingdom they were rebuilding together. Construction was everywhere, schools for gifted children, healing centers, memorial sites in every territory that had lost pack members to Victor's schemes. Lyra's hand rested on her stomach, still flat, but not for much longer. She and Draven had discovered the pregnancy 2 weeks ago, a new life, a new beginning. What should we name them, Draven asked softly, his hand covering hers. Something meaning hope, Lyra said. Something meaning second chances. Something that reminds us every day that from the darkest nights, the brightest futures can grow. Like Phoenix, rising from ashes. Or dawn, the light after darkness. They stood together as the sun set and the stars emerged. The memorial garden below blooming in the twilight, gold and purple flowers opening to the night. In the distance, Lyra heard children laughing, students at the academy, young wolves learning that their gifts made them strong. That survival was not weakness, that they could be healers and warriors and everything in between. She heard Kael's voice among them, teaching, guiding, showing them the same patience she'd once shown him with injured rocks and wounded rabbits. She felt the bond thrumming between her and Draven. No longer a prison, but a choice renewed every day. A connection built on honesty and mercy and the hard work of building something better than what came before. Do you think they forgive me? Draven asked quietly. Your family, your pack, for what I did. Lyra considered, chose her words carefully. I think forgiveness isn't about erasing what happened. It's about what you do after. You can't bring them back, can't undo the orders you gave. But you can make sure their deaths meant something, that their names are remembered, that the children who come after them grow up in a world where power protects instead of destroys. She turned in his arms, looked up at him. You're doing that every day. It doesn't erase the past, but it builds a future they would have wanted to see. Draven pressed his forehead to hers. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of your mercy, and I'll spend mine reminding you that you already are. They kissed as the stars wheeled overhead, as the memorial garden bloomed below, as the kingdom slowly, painfully, beautifully healed. 6 months had passed since they woke bonded, since Lyra's world had tilted into impossible territories, since she'd learned that the man who destroyed her pack could also be the man who helped rebuild it. 6 months of hard choices and harder truths, of learning that love and grief could exist in the same heart. That mercy was stronger than vengeance. That gardens could grow from graves if you were brave enough to plant the seeds. From her chamber's window, Lyra could see the future taking shape. Students studying, refugees finding homes, memorial markers standing testament to lives that mattered. That would always matter. And tomorrow she would wake beside the man she'd chosen. Not because of a bond forced upon her, but because she'd looked at the monster in her nightmares and seen a man worth saving, worth building beside, worth loving. The world was far from perfect. Justice was complicated. Healing took time. But for the first time in 3 years, Lyra felt something she'd forgotten how to feel. Hope. Not the fragile kind that shattered at the first sign of darkness, but the stubborn kind. The kind that survived massacres and forced bonds and 3 years of hiding. The kind that planted gardens among graves and called it defiance, called it living. Draven's arms tightened around her, their child growing between them. their kingdom spreading below them, their future uncertain, but theirs to write. Ready for tomorrow, he asked. Council meeting, budget review, testimonies from freed slaves. Another memorial dedication. Always, Lyra said, and meant it, because this was what healing looked like. Not erasing the scars, but learning to carry them with grace. Not forgetting the dead, but honoring them by building a world they would have been proud to see. The night bloomed around them, stars above, flowers below. And in the space between two people who'd learned that sometimes the greatest love stories were the ones that began with hate and fear and impossible odds. Sometimes the gardens that grew from graves were the most beautiful of all.